This week on the video version of the Business of Tech, analysis of the jobs data and trends in the world of work, Europol to delete data and the trend that reveals, 3 prediction pieces to discuss, another company goes 4-day work week, a new bug bounty program for SMBs and MSPs, and a novel approach to ransomware recovery. All this and more. Hit those like and subscribe buttons, and here are this week's stories. There's more parsing of the jobs data released last week. A Washington Post analysis piece digs into the 2021 labor market data, which at first glance would be the best year in labor market history, with 6.4 million new jobs and an hourly rise of wages of $1.46. Those top-line numbers are misleading. Take the new jobs data, representing only a 4.5% increase in the workforce, making it the 11th best year since record-keeping began in 1939. Or the hourly raise data shows workers having lost ground when accounting for inflation. Automation is highlighted as a labor solution in that article and in analysis by Axios, which looks at retail using cashierless checkouts. Tech solutions like Amazon's cashierless Go offerings and ones by startups like Standard Cognition are being installed. Or another examination of the tightness of the labor market by Axios leads to withdrawal of stimulus from the Fed. With unemployment down to 3.9% and continued raising of wages, there's an expectation of changes to Federal Reserve policy, potentially impacting the economy with the removal of so-called cheap money. How has the job market been reshaped? The most recent Ladder's quarterly remote work report, based on data on remote working opportunities from 50,000 companies, found that 18% of all professional jobs are now remote, including nearly 156,000 roles paying $100,000 or more. Ladder's found that developers, software engineers, and professionals in highly technical fields are seeing the most remote work opportunities, as are roles that emphasize organizational skills. And those figures from the U.S. Labor Department show that workers quit in record numbers in November 2021, with 4.5 million leaving their employers. And that's November, when the typical time for resignations is the beginning of a new year. Now, why do we care? I included the stories about automation because I immediately thought of those providers who deliver retail and how technology is changing that space so quickly. This is an e-commerce story for sure, and too many providers are missing the story about helping their customers grow using technology versus just keeping the tech alive. The more prominent theme, the value of keeping your existing team and investing in them due to the power shift. Don't bet on the shift back anytime soon, particularly around workers forced into the office. Because even if I'm wrong here, the safer bet for employers and managers is to plan for the more challenging terrain and be delightfully surprised if it's easier to navigate. The role of the CTO is continuing to increase. A recent survey of 5,000 CTOs and CIOs by the IBM Institute for Business Value stated that, quote, the CTO has become one of the most strategic roles within an organization. Top CTO responsibilities cited in the survey include C-suite and board advisory at 88%, software development lifecycle at 72%, cybersecurity at 69%, innovation strategy at 61%, and business continuity at 59%. CTOs also add data to their list of significant responsibilities. 79% of CTO respondents report a leadership role in their organization's data strategy, and 70% state that their colleagues look to them for data governance and stewardship. Why do we care? The value of the CTO is where smart money is. C-suite and board advisory translates to owner advisory services within the SMB. The stack rank of priorities shouldn't look different, just the scale and particulars. This should be the roadmap of services, which is why we care. Customers are telling us what they want. On Friday, I reported on Germany considering entirely doing away with data retention. More out of Europe on that topic. Quoting from the record. Today, Europol, the law enforcement agency of the EU, has been ordered to delete its massive database of information on EU citizens that it collected in recent years if the agency did not link subjects to any ongoing criminal activity. The decision was announced today by the European Data Protection Supervisor, an EU independent supervisory authority whose primary objective is to monitor and ensure that European institutions and bodies respect the right to privacy and data protection. The EDPS said that Europol has 1 year to comply with its decision, during which time the law enforcement agency must filter its database and delete any information on EU citizens that are not part of criminal investigations. Europol will be allowed to process personal information as part of investigations, but the data on those not linked to crimes must be erased after 6 months. Why do we care? This is another step towards a don't retain if you don't need it model. The story from Friday was a theoretical version, and this is a specific actual implementation. Data retention techniques and strategies are changing and certainly much faster in Europe. There's a cybersecurity upside here too, with a lot fewer data to be extorted for. In my mind, savvy providers will be looking at data management offerings that deliver this far before the regulations require them to, and I believe customers will reward that. And it has the upside of denying criminals data to hold for ransom. The Office of Personnel Management released their annual report to Congress on telework. Per the report, in fiscal year 2020, 50% of all federal workers were eligible to work remotely, an increase of 11 percentage points from the 39% reported to be eligible in fiscal 2019. Of those workers, 90% of eligible employees engaged in telework in 2020, marking a 34% increase over the previous year. And in other signs of the current state of play, more than 5 million Americans, or 2% of the workforce, could now be isolating, per Capital Economics' Andrew Hunter. Meta announced they will require COVID-19 boosters to return to the office and have delayed that reopening until March. Why do we care? Anecdotally, I've heard from multiple providers dealing with COVID staffing-related issues. This portion of the show is very tactical. Data points updating the listener on where we are. CISA officials have indicated that they have not seen a significant government intrusion due to Log4Shell. Yet. Jen Easterly, CISA director, said, quote, "This may be the case because sophisticated adversaries have already used this vulnerability to exploit targets and are just waiting to leverage their access until network defenders are on lower alert." Cyber attacks rose 50% in 2021 from 2020, and a particularly rough fourth quarter, mainly due to Log4j. This from Checkpoint Research. Kaspersky's survey data indicates higher spending on cybersecurity this year. 86% of IT decision makers in North America said their organization intends to set aside a budget for cybersecurity when planning for 2022. In addition, 85% said their budget would increase anywhere up to 50% in the next 12 months. In addition, more than 1 in 4 said their company annually invests anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 per year in cyber insurance. There are 3 top criteria they would be willing to meet to obtain cyber insurance: security controls, compliance, and education. An open-source developer purposely corrupted 2 libraries in apparent protest of doing free work. Quote, "Respectfully, I am no longer going to submit Fortune 500 and other smaller-sized companies with my free work," he said. "Take this as an opportunity to send me a 6-figure yearly contract or fork the project and have someone else work on it." Salesforce is moving to require multi-factor authentication for its customers starting February 1st. This will be Salesforce's Authenticator app, time-based authenticator apps, security keys, or built-in authenticators like Touch ID, Face ID, and Windows Hello. Why do we care? I continue to wish I had something pithy to say about open source, a problem I'm tracking more than anything else right now. The Salesforce move is one I want to highlight. Think you can't make your customers do something? Sure you can. Yesterday, Kaseya put out a press release to announce their 25% growth in 2021. The press release focuses on their multiple acquisitions and enhancements to their product lines. It makes no mention of their breach or any response to the incident. Now, why do we care? In a video during the summer, I predicted that Kaseya would focus on their growth numbers beyond the breach, and I point to this as the evidence. They didn't even take time to talk about investments in security after the breach as an accomplishment. If you just read their press releases, the incident didn't happen. This is apparently what the team at Channel Futures did. They also ran a story with the press release's headline and essentially copied and pasted it into a bylined article, which is a copy and paste of the press release. And they too made no mention of the breach. The why we care is all about financial incentives. Kaseya is incentivized to grow, full stop. Do not hate the player, hate the game. It's entirely predictable if you follow the incentives. If you want to change those incentives. Let's look at 3 prediction pieces for providers I didn't want to miss. First, Tech Isle with a top 10 predictions for 2022, which actually has 13. It's a good read with some echoes of my own predictions, particularly around cloud. I'll highlight one in particular. Momentum will build for business outcome-focused IT consumption model adoption. Quoting the piece, the business outcome-focused consumption model will provide a direct path to tying SMB IT investments to business objectives and value realization. The biggest driver will be connecting consumption costs to usage by giving IT services cost control to business management, managing the department's costs. In addition, however, SMBs will seek supplier guidance to precisely define the value and benefits of outcome-focused solutions based on consumption agreements and cloud solutions. Next, Channel Insider published the Channel Outlook for 2022, focused around an interview with Forrester's Jay McBain, again highlighting a single prediction around modernizing marketing. Quote, tech buying is changing, and so is the psychology, behavior, and journey of the buyers. Many business models are built around the baby boomer generation, yet they are no longer where the money is. The majority of buyers will be millennials within 4 years. They are the ones spending money, whether it's on houses, cars, childcare, smartphones, or IT services. And they want to use digital, not traditional channels. Therefore, those in the channel should review their existing models to see if they're clinging to ancient and time-honored methods that the younger generations have stopped using. It is time to freshen up the marketing and sales channels. Finally, out of CIO Dive, analysts estimate only 15% of IT spend is in the cloud, but 90% of businesses have implemented cloud systems. The mismatch highlights how much room there is for growth, especially around core app modernization. Why do we care? All analysts worth highlighting. Some quick hit takeaways. Tech Isle's observation about supplier guidance is the trick. Providers can write their own rules of success. Customers want to know what business outcomes are possible and will ask their provider to help with that. This should be a slam dunk. You write your own goals. I'm not saying it's all easy, I'm just observing that when you can write the goals, it's a lot more manageable. Forrester is right here to focus on the changing behaviors of the buyer. I've harped on e-commerce before because most providers are doing just what Jay highlights, clinging to ancient and time-honored methods that the younger generations have stopped using. Don't be a dinosaur. Finally, there's a lot more cloud to go. That's good news.
Think you know PCMatic? Think again. PCMatic is working with MSPs to deliver true zero-trust, default-deny endpoint security, allowing only trusted applications and blocking all the rest. A lightweight, simple-to-deploy, and easy-to-manage approach to application allow listing. Layering a default-deny approach provides MSPs of all sizes the ability to focus again on prevention, and PCMatic delivers this without impacting performance or efficiency. Find out more by visiting PCMatic.com/MSP and ask about their exclusive lead sharing program backed by a primetime national TV campaign.
I've mentioned the 4-day workweek before, and I wanted to highlight the Hustle's coverage of Bolt, who made the change permanent after a 3-month trial. Their employee survey results showed an 84% more productive, 86% said they were more efficient with their time, and 84% saw improvement in their work-life balance. This follows previous trials in both Japan and Iceland, which I've previously discussed. And while we're there, a study of German workers around their understanding of salaries. Asked how much they think they'd make if they had to find a new job in the same occupation within 3 months, most people believed they'd make about the same. The truth? They were actually underestimating others' wages and their occupation's median salary. Now, why do we care? Some previously very radical ideas are becoming mainstream. Everyone work from home or only 4 days a week. Now layer that on the power of the worker in the current landscape, and I continue to believe small, agile companies can be really innovative here and try new ideas. And those who test, measure, and iterate will do well. And those that sell that methodology will do even better. You don't have to be entirely right if you're testing and iterating. Huntress Labs has announced the donation of $100,000 to the Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure, which is to be used both to hire its first full-time staffer and to start a bug bounty program specific to the SMB and MSP space. The company has called on other vendors to make commitments to the effort and focused on this advice from John Strand of Black Hills Information Security. Quote, determine good application security from vendors by asking 2 questions. What their current program looks like, and if they'll share the results and conclusions of the most recent third-party vulnerability test they've commissioned. Why do we care? Financial incentives being a theme here, and kudos to Huntress for putting some money where their mouth is. This is not the same as being financially linked to success. It does signal a change in mentality that is starting among some of those involved in the delivery of services. I continue to predict that those who place those incentives around joint success will see the reward here before it becomes table stakes. How about some actual data on what working from home means? A recently published working paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research uses hard data to explore the impact of remote work on people's daily working schedules. I'll be quoting liberally from ZDNet. The research explores GitHub data covering the entirety of activity on public repositories in 2020 from several geographies. The analysis highlights a sharp reallocation towards weekend activity following the onset of COVID-19 in March 2020 compared to 2019. From a baseline of 20% to over 24%, this proportional increase represents a sizable shift in individuals' time use. Assuming a regular 40-hour work week translates to an additional 2 hours of work every weekend. That trend is somewhat reversed toward the end of 2020, but the shift is long-lasting and characterizes 2020. Overall, working hours have also increased following the onset of the pandemic. In most countries in the sample recorded a significant 15 to 20% increase in overall activity relative to the forecast baseline is found. Assuming these changes are reflected proportionately against a regular 40-hour workweek, this translates to approximately 8 hours of additional training each week. However, elevated activity levels had generally returned to normal by the start of July 2020, coinciding with the reopening of the global economy. As economies worldwide have reopened and leisure opportunities have returned, so too have workers returned to a regular 40 or 50-hour workweek. But they have not necessarily returned to the same 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday schedule, the analysis finds. The GitHub data is skewed by tech professionals and, in particular, males. The researchers are adamant in emphasizing that their study population is not necessarily representative of the modal worker in the economy. They add that this population is ideally suited for measuring the effect of work from home on labor timing and intensity. While we do not observe remote work directly, previous research finds that workers in digital knowledge spaces like computers are easily able to do their job remotely. That ex post, the vast majority of these workers were working remotely in the pandemic. Why do we care? Factual research data, and that's why we care. The work from home surge initially caused workers to work more, and likely as there was little else to do, and panic about keeping a job. When options returned, the numbers fell, but not the same work pattern. The very definition of dispersed work, and controlled by the worker's schedule, not by the employer's. The longer work from home goes on, the less likely it will be for employers to unwind this back to the old ways. The executive order intended to boost the federal government's cyber defenses continues to show action. NIST has released guidance for system engineers in a document titled Engineering Trustworthy Secure Systems. It's a resource for computer engineers and other professionals on the programming side of cybersecurity efforts. A quote from NextGov. One of the key updates NIST authors made in the latest version of the publication was a fresh emphasis on security assurances. In software systems engineering, assurance is represented by the evidence that a given system's security procedures are robust enough to mitigate asset loss and prevent cyber attacks. State, local, and education IT officials intend to follow that EO's guidance. In a survey of officials, 67% are somewhat likely to adopt practices and activities outlined in Biden's order, while another 19% said they are very likely to do so. CISA also warns of critical infrastructure attacks by Russian state-sponsored actors. The advisory warned against common but effective tactics used to gain initial access to victim networks, including spear phishing, brute force attacks, and exploiting known vulnerabilities. The agency also highlighted 15 vulnerabilities that are being used in those compromises. The record also highlights a novel approach to ransomware response. A Scandinavian hotel chain that switched all effective systems to Chrome OS. Instead of contacting the hackers, the hotel moved its entire PC fleet from Windows to Chrome OS within roughly 3 days, converting 2,000 computers in 212 hotels in 5 countries. Why do we care? Think that through. A business moved entirely to Chrome OS in 3 days, rather than pay the ransom. The resources pushed by the EO are becoming available, and as predicted, the base level of standard is rising. The federal level flows to the state level, and the contractors working with those agencies. I have an interview discussing the entire SLED space coming out, but this is how, for those wondering how those executive orders make it to the field. I recently talked about the PC's revival. That trend is slowing slightly as shipments decreased 5% in the fourth quarter of 2021 versus 2020. Overall for the year, however, Canalys reports they are up 15% year over year and 27% over 2019. That puts shipments at their highest point in nearly a decade. I'm going to combine that with 2 other thoughts today. First, an enterprise strategy group report points to, quote, higher levels of digital transformation maturity and suggests that digitally mature companies lead the pack when it comes to planned IT investment. The ESG research showed that the portion of enterprises citing digital maturity has doubled over the past 4 years, 26% of the respondents. Most companies with mature transformation projects plan to expand tech spending this year. 69% of organizations in the mature category are expected to boost spending above 2021 levels. That proportion dropped to 59% for companies in the project planning phase and 18% for companies yet to embark on digital transformation. The other is a look at the Wall Street Journal essay about repurposing offices as clubhouses or social spaces, and a follow-on one in Tech Republic considering that for technology companies. Why do we care? My story here, we see the change in both ways, and locations employees work. I think it's fair to observe that desktop PCs have a better cost-to-power ratio. You get more for less. And if employees aren't moving around or need to be in two locations, it makes sense to give them desktops. One more piece of savings in this whole shift. The ESG data points to my idea of haves and have-nots. Those who have moved through and beyond digital transformation are in a very different place than those still planning. If we link that to the pandemic overall, there appears to be a group of companies that will be further behind. Some updates on government moves. The FCC has proposed stricter requirements for reporting data breaches. The proposals require notifications for customers impacted by inadvertent breaches, where a company leaves data exposed rather than having it breached. It would also remove a 1-week waiting period for notifying customers. The Senate has approved a bipartisan piece of legislation to boost coordination on cybersecurity between Homeland Security and state and local governments. By unanimous consent, the State and Local Government Cybersecurity Act would allow the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center to provide state and local actors access to upgraded security tools and procedures. It also bolsters the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center to help prevent and respond to future digital incidents. Why do we care? Indeed, more steps on the changing landscape. A year ago, these stories were much more theoretical, and today they're moving through Congress. Twitter's move to work from anywhere, combined with a requirement to add more people of color to final job candidate slates, has resulted in significant gains in hiring Black and Latinx employees. Quoting Bloomberg, the share of Black workers among the U.S. workforce jumped to 9.4% in 2021 from a 6.9% a year earlier, and Latinx workers to 8% of employees from 5.5%, the company said Wednesday. Twitter didn't disclose how many workers the improvement represents or the current size of the U.S. workforce. In the third quarter, the company had 7,100 workers globally. Twitter in 2020 promised that women would make up half the workforce, and underrepresented groups would be 25% of the U.S. workforce by 2025. Women were 44.7% of the global workforce in 2021. Executive pay is now determined in part by how they meet those diversity goals. Why do we care? It's that last statement. In the theme of financial incentives, Twitter has made course corrections by incentivizing leadership. Measure and create incentives, and action is taken. Thanks for tuning in to This Week in the Business of Tech. Shows come out each week, pulling together the daily podcast. If you like this show, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The content here is possible because of supporters like you. If you want access to shows early, answers to your questions, and private interactions, join our Patreon. It's pay what you want. You decide what the content is worth. Join at patreon.com/MSPradio. Patreons also get access to the written versions of every story as they come out. If you want the stories right away, you can get them on the daily podcast. Find The Business of Tech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Subscribe links at businessof.tech, and I'll talk to you again next week.